General Alvin, thank you for your service. Congratulations on your nominations. Congratulations to your family as well, and thank them for their service. And thanks to all the airmen who you've been representing up here in your current role and who you would represent in your new role if confirmed. Speaking of confirmation, since Senator Shaheen talked about the current situation on the floor, I just want to say that we could also easily confirm you if Chuck Schumer would get off the dime and shows that he actually cares about supporting our men and women in uniform. Of course, we voted before on general officer nominations. We voted just a few years ago for Mark Milley to be chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And you may say that's something special, but apparently Chuck Schumer doesn't think it's too special because he has said he's not going to have that vote for C.Q. Brown. Maybe my Democratic colleagues can go talk to Chuck Schumer, as they're always encouraging us to go talk to Tommy Tuberville. Second, my Democratic colleagues just a few years back required us to vote on the shift of H.R. McMaster, who was only a 3-star general, not a 4-star general. You demanded that we voted on H.R. McMaster simply because he was going from one job to the next job. So I don't think it'd be too much to ask for the Senate to spend a little bit of time confirming 4-star general officers to positions like Chief of Staff of the Air Force or Commandant of the Marine Corps or Chief of Naval Operations. That said, General Alvin, you said something I want to quibble with just a little bit. You said you don't think war is inevitable. I have to say, if you look over the stretch of human history, you have to conclude that war is, in fact, inevitable. But in a paradoxical way, it seems that no specific or particular war is inevitable. And I think that's what you and Secretary Kendall are driving at about China, right? Even if war is inevitable in the human condition, a war between the United States and China is not inevitable. Is that right?
Senator, that's better put than I put it.
So the reason I stress that is because if this or that particular war does occur, it's not because it was inevitable, it's because it was the result of poor choices made by one side or the other or both. And I want to look into one choice in particular that we may be making that could tempt China to think they might win a war. Air superiority is critical in modern warfare, is that correct?
Senator, that is absolutely correct.
And that's a lesson that we've seen in Ukraine in particular. Russia expected to have air superiority in just a matter of days. They still have not established air superiority. What has that meant for them on the battlefield?
Well, Senator, I think that we've seen that they are struggling in places where they did not anticipate that they would struggle. And also, it tends to go towards the Ukrainians' innovation and their ability to adapt on the fly. But it's clear that the Russians were not making the progress that they had intended.
And is it fair to say that air superiority in the Western Pacific, especially in a conflict over Taiwan, would be as important or even more important than it has been in the land war in Ukraine?
Senator, I believe that to be the case.
Okay, thank you. So with all that in mind, the Air Force has stated repeatedly for the last few years that to meet our modernization requirement, it has to accept risk. That's a common phrase we hear, accept risk to divest combat aircraft. But at the same time, China is rapidly expanding its Air Force. So I share Secretary Kendall's reported concerns about the ability of the Air Force to face China tomorrow because I think we've had to accept a lot of near-term risk. Would increased funding for the Air Force necessarily decrease the risk we're having to accept in terms of near-term combat capability?
Well, Senator, thank you for that. And a very, very well laid out question. I believe I would say that in the case of air superiority, as we see it in the future, we look back on how we've achieved it in the past, and I believe that is not going to be the way that we're going to be able to obtain air superiority, which is over large swaths for large periods of time. However, as we look towards modernization, we understand having the right capability in the right amount at the right time, synchronized with the joint fight, is going to be the key to air superiority in the future. So maybe regional, maybe temporal, but it's going to be just as important. And so as we look towards modernizing, we're looking toward keeping the most relevant platforms. And unfortunately, we still have some platforms that are marginally relevant, but will not likely be difference makers in a China fight. So those tough decisions that we're making or proposing to the Congress are those to be able to divest those that will be less effective today, and the money that we spend on trying to keep them airborne is money that will not be spent on being able to develop the capabilities of tomorrow. So additional resources obviously would alleviate some of that tension, but we are still constantly making those decisions and balancing today's risk.
So some savings I understand from that divestiture and that we can reinvest in the kind of platforms we need, but additional money appropriated beyond that for, say, F-35s or collaborative combat aircraft or munitions would no doubt help establish greater likelihood of air superiority in the Western Pacific, correct?
That's correct, Senator, assuming we can get them in the timely manner.
One final question. Another part of air superiority, especially in facing a threat like China, is our allies. As we've discussed, we're about to have foreign military training for the F-35s for allies at Ebbing Air Force Base. Can I get your commitment that if confirmed, you'll do everything in your power to ensure that project moves forward on a timely basis and we have the Sound of Freedom back in the River Valley next fall, 2024?
Senator, you do that commitment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.